can draft men to war. What do you guys think about drafting women to have children? What do you think about that? Is that fair proposition?
No, because we want children to be born into families that are
healthy,
willing to be responsible for a child, that are willing to be good parents.
Yeah, but men don't want to go and die in some trench in the French cow country. Okay,
but there's also a child you have to consider in this situation. It's not just about what people want. There's a child. There's a child involved, and we want the well-being of that child to be taken into consideration.
I also don't recall God ever comparing childbearing to war, men being enlisted in war in the Bible.
Sorry, what?
Like, I don't recall women bearing a child compared to men enlisting in the war in the Bible.
Are you saying war less bad than giving birth? Or
actually it is. So the idea of women being saved through childbirth is mentioned many, many, many times, that's one of the primary pathways to salvation for women. It gives it a moral autonomy in society.
Also, I'm not really interested on this particular topic. I'm not making a religious argument, because the United States and every single country in the world compels males only to be conscripted in times of war. So it's not even a biblical or theological or religious argument.
I agree with you. I was just responding.
Oh, well, I'm not directing that at you, Andrew. I'm directing it at her.
That's 1 Timothy 2:15, by the way. Yet she will be saved through childbearing. They continue in faith, love, and holiness.
Yeah.
So
for example,
it is a moral duty.
You could have a secular government that only, and this is the case for almost every single nation with the exception of less than a handful, men are compelled by force in times of war, drafted. There's no corresponding, like, we're going to force women to do this.
Okay,
sure.
Low-key, this sounds like The Handmaid's Tale. Are you saying we're forcefully impregnating women? Is that what like, how else are we?
No, I'm not doing a prescriptive claim. I'm speaking descriptively. I'm talking about what is, not what should be. I don't think women should be forced to, but it is an interesting thought experiment to be like, okay, well, if the government can force men to, go somewhere, European theater during World War II, European theater during World War I, and die in some trench and be bombarded with shells and for months on end and suffer extreme PTSD. This kind of ties into our previous conversation with duties. So men have duties to the point where they can be forced to go to war for their country. And we can talk about, well, women's duties are this, but it's not state compelled, whereas men's duties are state compelled through force. Nobody points a gun in a woman's head and says, in a time of war where here, I can frame it this way. Well, to finish my sentence, women, there's nothing that compels women from the state down that says, okay, you need to go have kids, you need to produce kids. Nothing like that. Let's say, for example,
not even that it would be a good idea. Think about it from even the military side. Like, you guys remember growing up with the Army commercials? Like, they would even put the Army commercials in kids' shows, right? Thinking that this would assist with the psychological indoctrination for later, you know what I mean? And they had the cool music, and, they would have these cool slogans like Army of One, you know what I mean? Things like that. All of that was indoctrination from the top down in order to get men to fulfill a social duty for the protection of the nation. Same thing, but there's no equivalent of that, even through propaganda for women. And that's kind of Brian's main point.
So then are you both saying that men should not be legally obligated to fight in wars?
Well, I think that the draft is necessary. And I think that there's all sorts of compelling reasons I can give. Now, this is one of my most unpopular positions, that I think that the draft is necessary, and that there can be great times where you need huge amounts of conscripts to defend the nation, and that there is a social obligation for men to do that. The reason men resist that now is because they don't feel like women are living up to the same obligations that they are compelled to have to move towards, and so they don't want the draft anymore. Women can't be drafted. Right? There's all sorts of double standards for women. Women, for instance, sports reporters, I was talking about this earlier today, they can go into men's locker rooms. And they fought for the right to go into men's locker rooms to interview them. Men can't go into women's locker rooms and do interviews. Like, there's all kinds of crazy double standards which are set between the sexes. In an egalitarian society, you can't really have that. So it's like, if it is the case that you think that women deserve an honored place in society as matrons, then they have to fulfill their social obligations like they expect men to do. Or why is it that you would have any expectations of men? Why wouldn't men just resist it at every level? That's Brian's point here, right?
I actually agree with you a lot on the draft is necessary and stuff. What I think, this is just a thought I've randomly had, is that women shouldn't be allowed to go to college until they're like 28. If men are being drafted, women shouldn't be allowed to go to college until they're 28 unless they have kids. It's just a thought I had. Because if they don't have a career to seek after, then they have husbands. It's a thought. It's a thought.
Interesting thought.
It's a thought.
That's a crazy
Fair.
thought.
Hey,
It's a crazy thought.
interesting one.
I speak what I say. I speak what I say.
yeah, that's okay.
I think one way that
idea.
you can take care of this is you take the right to vote and you give it to married households instead, one household voting.
Ooh, that's
I think
nice.
that's a
There we
really
go.
good idea.
I like that
One of
idea.
the reasons that's a good idea is right now in the current state of voting, the anti-suffragettes, the ones who were against feminism initially, and it was first wave feminism that brought in the suffrage movement to say that women should be able to vote, they made it one of the most compelling arguments, which is this will divide household against household. It'll divide husbands against wives. The second women become political pawns of the machine, they will be divided from their husbands. That's exactly what's happened. The anti-suffragette arguments read like prophecies now. If you read them now, they read like prophecies. Like, it's amazing how accurate each one of those arguments is.
Oh, one question,
Households
Andrew.
are indeed divided.
And the anti-suffragettes, wasn't it predominantly women, correct?
That's correct. Well, not only that, but what's really interesting is that they had to fight so that women couldn't vote on voting, because when women voted on their right to vote, they voted against it. And initially, feminists made the bold claim that the reason is because women were too comfortable and their status in society was too good. And it was. They couldn't incur any debt. No debt. They weren't allowed to incur any debt whatsoever. The husband had to incur the debt.
Wow.
They weren't, all of these things, that women were so comfortable in society, they didn't want to be considered political cogs. To give you an idea of how powerful women were in their moral stances before they became cogs of the voting machine, they passed the 18th Amendment, which passed before the 19th Amendment, which is their right to vote, right? They got the 18th Amendment passed on just moral grounds because they were considered moral arbiters in society. They were considered the more moral sex, because they were not political cogs to be used. And it's like, and they gave up all that high ground. It's just crazy to me. It's like backwards. You know what I mean? It's backwards. We should not be dividing husbands against wives. We don't need to do that. It's not necessary.
I would say in like
Hang on,
today's-
chair three was giving me the look though. She was giving me the like.
Sorry, I have
crazy-
RBF.
This crazy fucking guy, this crazy fucker's ideas over here.
Do you actually think that women should not have the right to vote?
Well, actually, I think most people shouldn't have the right to vote, not just women specifically. And here, well, let me make a case, and let's see. Maybe I can make a compelling enough argument that I can change your mind. Does that sound fair?
You can try.
So, do you think that you're pretty informed on the issue of abortion?
Yes.
Do you think that most women at 18 years old are?
No, but I don't think most men are either.
Why do you think it's a good idea? Yeah, men either. Exactly. Agreed. Do you think it's a good idea that they can nullify your well-informed vote?
That they can what?
Nullify your well-informed vote on that issue.
I think that everyone should still have the right to use their vote when they are impacted by the government.
Why do you hate the founders so much? The founders didn't believe that. Our founding fathers not only didn't believe that, but set it up so that that system was not in place. They believed that stakeholders in society themselves should have the right to vote because they were informed on these political issues and had stake in society. And that the youth especially, like our founding fathers, would roll over in their graves if they knew that 18-year-olds could vote inside of political elections. They would lose their fucking minds. They'd be like, what are you people doing? Are you insane? So, I mean, why do you disagree with them? Why do you think it's a good idea?
Well, because they're
Like, even
still
if we just-
impacted by the
Right.
government. That creates the ability for the government to oppress 18-year-olds.
I mean,
if they
10-year-olds
can't.
16-year-olds are
10-year-olds are-
Yeah, I mean-
16-year-olds are impacted by the government.
It's
Should they
valid.
be able to vote?
Well, first of all, 10-year-olds can't also don't
I said
go and fight
16.
wars. But no,
16.
I honestly, I mean, that is It's a valid argument. But no, I think
18, yeah, it's a valid argument. 18-year-olds can be drafted, and they can't buy a beer. They can't buy a fucking beer.
They can't rent a car.
But they can be drafted. They can't buy a cigarette. They can't rent a car, but they can be drafted and go off to war. How is this a good system? Like, make a compelling argument back. How is it a good system?
I think honestly,
18-year-olds are so fucking stupid they shouldn't be able to drink, but they're so smart that they should be allowed to have a gun and that they can be compelled and conscripted into military service. How is this a good system again?
No, I honestly, I kind of see your point, but I don't think the solution is to take away vote. Honestly, if anything, it would be to ensure voters are well informed before they vote. But no, I think it's a hard thing because there's pros and cons of.
I don't think it's a good system. I think if we look, and here maybe I could change your mind because we found some common ground here.
Yes, but your argument doesn't say why women shouldn't have the right to vote. It's kind of just saying why 18-year-olds are dumb.
Was my argument that women shouldn't be able to vote? What was my actual argument? That most people should be able to, right?
Right. Okay. So how does this relate?
Yeah, so I think that you could do one household voting. I would give the right to vote to married households. I think that could be a really good idea. Another way that you could do is you could raise the age of voting to 30. I think that would be super helpful. I think that there's all sorts of different things that you could do, but it's going to disenfranchise a whole lot of people. And I'm just totally fine with that. I don't think everybody needs to be enfranchised. I think what's happened is the way politics are set up in the United States, they're set up between blocks. And it's which block can be bribed by the electoral money that lobbyists go in and say, look, we're going to fund you with X dollars so that we can pump and dump a bunch of cash, right? A big scam for a voting block. And then they use that sort of political power, not on behalf of the constituency, but on behalf of the lobbyists. So why is it a good idea to have everybody politically enfranchised when clearly they make terrible decisions in life? And they're not ready for that sort of responsibility whatsoever in running a nation, having the say in running a nation. Why would you let them vote? That's stupid, right?
Well, the issue is there's smart people that are 18 and there's really, really dumb people that are 80 years old. And like there's going to be smart and dumb people. And so you can't just generalize a whole age group.
I completely agree with you, but you can generalize, and here's why. I can agree with you. There's going to be really smart. There's going to be 18-year-olds right now who are much smarter than you. Not me, but you. And the thing, I'm kidding. It was a great joke. I slipped it in there. It was a great joke. But anyway, there's going to be 18-year-olds who are out there who are smarter than me and you. I agree with that. There's not going to be many, though. And there's going to be 80-year-olds who are much dumber than that 18-year-old, but there's not going to be that many of them. Okay, so if that's the case, we're not going to make social policy based on outliers.
Yeah.
You would never do that. Everything in politics is a give and take. Anytime you make a political decision, it's going to negatively affect some group somewhere, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So knowing that, having that foreknowledge, why would we make social prescriptions based around the fact that some stupid-ass 18-year-olds no longer can vote, but the like one or two who were really smart and informed, we've taken away their vote too? It's like, so what?
Yes,
that's politics.
But if the government isn't incentivized to care about young people, if we really did make the voting age 30, then the government isn't going to care about young people anymore. They are not going to work as hard for them. That's just how it would work. That's why
it's silly. That's silly. The constituency of the government would be parents. The parents are definitely going to have a whole lot to say about how young people are treated and what young people ought to be doing or not doing, just like parents in the home do right now with their kids who can't vote. So how would it even disenfranchise them? They would have to trust in the generation of their own parents to represent them correctly, which, by the way, they do right now. They do it right now.
Did you say something?
I wouldn't say that they
No, I'd like an argument there. I'd like an argument back.
Yeah.
From me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree. There's pros and cons to each thing, but no, I still think that the government is not going to care as much about the younger people if they're not having to cater to their vote. And I think that if you are being taxed by the country, if you are having to fight for your country, you should have a say in how the government is run. But no, I do think there's just an issue. I agree with you that there's an issue on voters not being well informed.
This is really, I guess the thing I would like to take to task here is this idea that the government's going to stop caring about young people if young people can't vote in the government. It's like, does the government stop caring about 16-year-olds because they can't vote? No. Do they stop caring about toddlers because toddlers can't vote? No. In fact, parents are out there making all sorts of political decisions and political votes based around the protection of the young in society and the infirm in society, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, on behalf of those 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, because they're the ones who can. They're the ones who are enfranchised. Why in the world, suddenly if the voting age, let's say it was 25, do you think that the government's like, well, you're 23, fuck off, I don't care what you think anymore? The enfranchised people still care, right? Like, they're the ones who tell the government what's what.
Well, also the thing is, a 2-year-old isn't having to pay taxes. They're not having to fight a war. So if we were to go by your argument that you can't vote until you're 30, I don't think people under 30 should have to pay taxes or fight in wars.
Why? That's silly. 16-year-olds can work and they get taxed. Should they have to go fight wars?
I think that's an issue that you're giving back to the government, to your country, and you don't have a say in how the country is run.
16-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds with part-time jobs should be able to vote then, by that logic?
I think there's pros and cons to everything.
But that doesn't make any sense, because your logic is if you're paying into a system, you should have a right to be enfranchised in the system. My counter argument to you is really simple. Then if that's the case, make it logically consistent. At 13 years old, I had a part-time job at a McDonald's. Should I be able to vote? If not, why not?
Honestly, it's a compelling argument in itself. That's why, I mean, no matter which way you go, no matter who you cut out of voting, it's going to negatively impact some people. And it's a complex issue.
So we have to kind of compare our systems and see which one works the best. And it sounds like you're in more agreement with the system which I would propose than I am with the system that you would propose. I'm just asking you to think about it, that's all.
Okay.
All right.